In the summer of 2011, a routine deep-sea survey in the far northern reaches of the Baltic Sea took an unexpected turn. A seasoned commercial dive crew, accustomed to scanning the ocean floor for lost wrecks, encountered a sonar contact unlike anything they had ever seen before. It lay sprawled across the seabed, a vast and mysterious form whose shape defied immediate explanation. Since that first moment of detection, this peculiar structure has stirred debates, inspired wild theories, and resisted all efforts to determine its true nature. What exactly is now known as the Baltic Sea Anomaly? The ship's journey to the remote dive location had been anything but smooth. Harsh winds and choppy waters repeatedly slowed their progress, forcing them to adjust their speed and route. By the time they finally reached the coordinates, the crew's sense of anticipation was high, but muted by the looming threat of worsening weather. On the deck, the team worked against the clock, unloading the remotely operated vehicle, ROV, and making sure every cable, camera, and sensor was in perfect working order. Everyone knew they had a narrow window before the approaching storm would make diving impossible. Below deck, expedition leaders Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Asperg monitored the sonar displays, looking for a specific shape they had glimpsed during earlier scans. Minutes passed in tense silence until two large, familiar-looking forms began to materialize on the screen. Their location was correct, but excitement was tempered by reality. The ship had burned through more fuel than expected getting here, and the incoming front suggested they might only have time for one good pass over the target. Up on deck, a voice crackled over the intercom. The ROV was in the water. The live feed flickered to life on the main control room monitor, and crew members gathered shoulder to shoulder around it, eager for their first direct look at the anomaly. The only sounds were the steady hum of equipment and the soft clicks of controls. The ROV descended into the murky green depths, its front-mounted spotlights slicing through clouds of suspended sediment. Visibility was poor, as expected, but at around 70 meters down, the water began to clear. Then something caught their eyes, a faint outline in the distance, resting silently on the sandy bottom. As the drone drew closer, disconnected curves and edges slowly joined into a single, unmistakably circular shape. But just as the depth counter ticked past 80 meters, the instruments went haywire. The ROV's compass spun erratically. In the same instant, the video feed collapsed into static and then blackness. Someone muttered an expletive under their breath while the crew scrambled to regain control. From above, a deckhand shouted that the control cable seemed to have snagged on something below, and the ROV wasn't responding to retrieval commands. The controller reported total instrument failure. No positioning data, no reliable readouts. And then, as abruptly as it had vanished, the feed returned. The camera was now facing what looked astonishingly like a carved stone staircase. For several minutes, other ship systems mysteriously flickered and rebooted on their own as the Ocean X team recorded every bit of imagery they could. Eventually, the call came to bring the ROV back. The retrieval was silent. No one seemed willing to speculate aloud. They had seen something extraordinary, but they were no closer to knowing what it truly was. Ocean X, the Swedish maritime exploration company behind this find, was no stranger to deep-water mysteries. The group first drew public attention in 1992 when they located the wreckage of a US B-17 bomber off Sweden's eastern coast. A find thought lost since the Second World War. Encouraged by that success, the team began researching the fates of other vessels that had vanished in northern European waters. Eventually, their attention settled on the story of a First World War transport ship sunk somewhere in the Baltic. On November 3, 1916, in the gray dawn off the Finnish coast, the German submarine U-22 intercepted a supply convoy bound for the port of Roma. Under the command of Captain Lieutenant Karl Stier, the U-boat attacked swiftly, sending 3 ships to the bottom. One of the victims was the Swedish schooner Jönköping, carrying a lucrative cargo of champagne and cognac destined for Moscow's famed Metropole Hotel. The wreck came to rest nearly 200 feet down, its valuable contents preserved in the icy darkness. After a long search, Ocean X located the vessel in 1997. With the aid of a massive floating crane, they salvaged approximately 3,000 bottles of champagne and 14 barrels of cognac, before weather conditions forced them to abandon the site to the sea once again. The recovered treasures were auctioned to collectors, funding future expeditions. Fast forward to the summer of 2011. The Ocean X team was in the Gulf of Bothnia, the stretch of the Baltic between Sweden and Finland. They were conducting systematic sonar scans in search of potentially valuable wrecks when something wholly unexpected appeared on their instruments. Lying roughly 300 feet down was a massive, perfectly round object. The sonar return didn't match any known ship, submarine, or natural formation. It was far from any shipping lanes and appeared completely out of place. Though intrigued, the crew lacked the equipment to dive at that time. They returned to port to study the sonar imagery more closely. Under magnification, the shape revealed itself in greater detail. Founders Lindbergh and Asperg measured it at about 200 feet in diameter. Its surface was marked with straight lines and rectangular patterns that looked almost architectural, as though corridors and chambers had been etched into the stone. Behind it stretched what resembled a 1,000-foot-long runway in the seabed, as if the object had slid into its present location. The following year, armed with upgraded sonar systems, ROVs, and new dive plans, the team returned to the coordinates. Their aim was to capture high-resolution images and gather physical evidence. But from the outset, things did not go as planned. Whenever they tried to operate cameras or sonar near the object, electronics failed without warning. ROVs shut down mid-dive. Satellite phones, recently charged, went dead. Even the ship's sonar operators found their scans disrupted by unexplained interference. Determined, they sent divers equipped with more traditional gear. What they found deepened the mystery. The surface of the anomaly wasn't smooth. It was covered in grooves, ridges, and in some areas, perfectly round holes drilled straight through the stone. Several sections resembled staircases, while a raised dome-like structure jutted upward, hinting at an internal chamber. Around the base of the main object lay other shaped items, rectangular blocks, upright monoliths, some of which were embedded deeply in the seabed, suggesting hidden tunnels beneath. Eventually, after battling repeated equipment breakdowns, the team gathered what samples they could and returned to shore. When analyzed at Stockholm University, the materials were found to be basalt, volcanic rock, in a region with no volcanic activity for over 1 billion years. This geological oddity only fueled speculation. If it wasn't formed here naturally, how had it arrived? To some, the anomaly is proof of past extraterrestrial visitation. The circular form, the apparent runway behind it, the dome-like cockpit, all seem to fit a classic image of a spacecraft that made a controlled descent into the sea centuries ago. Others believe it may be the work of an ancient human civilization, perhaps a temple or fortress built long before recorded history, now submerged by shifting seas. The resemblance to walls, stairs, and architectural layouts supports this theory. More fringe interpretations imagine it as part of a prehistoric portal or gateway, perhaps tied to myths like Atlantis. Still others consider more recent origins. During World War II, Nazi Germany pursued countless experimental projects. Could this have been a secret undersea installation, an observation post, or anti-shipping weapon designed to disrupt electronics? If so, it might explain why modern devices fail near it. On the more skeptical side, some argue it could be the remains of a large sculptural object lost from a passing ship, or a naturally formed rock outcrop shaped by glacial movement during the last ice age. And, inevitably, there are those who dismiss the anomaly entirely as either a sonar misinterpretation or a deliberate hoax. Whatever its origin, alien, ancient, wartime, geological, or fabricated, the Baltic Sea Anomaly refuses to give up its secrets. Its ability to interfere with modern electronics continues to hinder study. In an era of rapidly advancing technology, it seems likely that further expeditions will eventually reveal more. Yet there is a lingering possibility that each new piece of information will only lead to deeper, stranger questions. The Baltic Sea still holds this enigma in its cold, dark depths, silently awaiting the day its full story can finally be told.